The slides are coming. So we have again a full agenda. There is one slide showing at which time which slot is starting. You can go through it. Can you go one further? As far as I know, we have a JavaScript. Is this correct? You are taking the minutes or scribing Java? EasyPad, fine. We have, EasyPad prepared, as you see on the slide set. Is there anybody else who can write into EasyPad as minute taker? Everybody can write, actually. Everybody is invited to write into EasyPad. Okay, so we need a JavaScript. Who has Java running? Lada, can you do it? Okay, you can sit over there. There is a special seat reserved for JavaScripts.
Only because it will be easier for you to get in and out.
Okay, so after these practicalities, we can go one slide further. Note well, please take care. This is a IETF working group session. Everything you say here needs to be seen under the policy of IETF. There are a few BCP drafts you need to take care of. Please read not well. Whatever you say is a contribution to IETF. Go ahead. Okay, let me make it pretty short. The status of chartered items since last meeting. We finally published 3 documents, 8071, 8040, and 8072 for NetConf, RESCONF call home, RESCONF protocol, Yang patch media type. Thank you very much to everybody who contributed to those documents. RESCONF especially is something we were waiting in the industry a long time already. Projects were using it. Adopted the draft IETF-NETCONF RFC 6536 bis. This is the NetConf NACM. We had good progress for notification subscription related documents. The so-called design team, led by Eric, had a good progress. So zero touch provisioning key store and TLS SSH client server models. There is progress to be seen. It is ongoing work, will be finalized soon. Agreed with the authors to develop the Varsha draft in Anima working group. So this has been a discussion recently. So current agenda, we have the zero touch and key store TLS client server models by Kent Watson. We have the notification subscription documents. Go ahead. Presented by Eric Voigt. There is one document which is not yet workgroup item, Yang notification headers and bundles. We will discuss this too and include into the charter. NetConf access control model by Andy Bierman. As far as I know, this has a good progress and can go to workgroup last call. Go ahead. We have the charter discussion. Draft charter proposal was in discussion on the mail list already a few weeks. There are a few changes to it. We should go through them. We have a joint discussion prepared for NetConf, NetMod, and I2RS. Let's see what's coming up. A few things can be restated here just to announce them so that everybody is aware. It is a particular topic, impact of DS concept on NetConf, RESCONF, presented by Martin. This is important for us. NetConf changes to support I2RS or RESCONF changes to support I2RS will be explained by Sue. These are also going to be NetConf, RESCONF extensions we would like to do in NetConf working group. Non-charted items, gRPC summary will be given. I don't know whether this will be done by Benoit or the gRPC author. Accounting in NetConf and RESTConf by Mahesh was discussed last time. NetConf proxy is pretty new. Let's see, we will be trying to be on time. I hope we will have time for those at the end of the list. Can you go one further? So this is the starting ending times for all time slots. Let's hope we can do it everything on time and everybody gets the time we promised to provide. Okay, let's, we can stop here and go to presentations. I think Kent is next.
Okay, Kent Watson, Juniper Networks. I'm going to try and go faster than my allowed time. Zero touch first. Okay. First, we'll talk about the zero touch draft. And so just quickly, last time we reviewed a heavily updated draft with the expectation of being able to go to last call shortly. All we had to do was resolve the artifact issue, which was plaguing the voucher draft, Anima voucher draft as well. The artifact issue did get resolved using the RESTConf Yang data structure, but that led to a rather major refactoring to occur within this draft. So I'm going to skip going over the updates that have been made. You can read the slide or look at the diffs in the draft itself. But the net of the current solution is that we went from having a total of 6 artifacts to 3 artifacts. Those being first what's currently called the zero touch, or been renamed the zero touch information artifact, which is a PKCS7 structure. PKCS7 has the ability to either be signed or unsigned. So if you don't want it to be signed, you just don't have it signed. The second is being the owner certificate, and what we've done here is also a PKCS7 structure. But what we've done here is that we've embedded the certificate chain into that structure, and also it can embed into it the revocations that you may have, CRLs or OCSP responses. And then lastly is the ownership voucher, which is from the Anima draft, and it is also currently a PKCS7 structure, although I have to let you know that the Anima working group is discussing maybe using JWT instead of PKCS7. Okay, so in other news, I've developed a fairly robust unit test to simulate the removable storage use case. So remember, one of our use cases is for someone being able to put all the artifacts onto a USB key fob and use SneakerNet and plug it into a device and bootstrap the device that way. I implemented that because everything was just files, and I didn't have to worry about writing code to do client and server protocols, but also for IP reasons, my company. In order to achieve that, I did have to write some custom C code to pack and unpack some PKCS7 structures. So it wasn't just pure OpenSSL command line, scripts, but the C code was trivial, and they're posted to GitHub in the Zero Touch GitHub repository. Just 3 open issues. We'll go over them one at a time next. First is the DHCP artifact size issue. So I don't know if Ian is here. Ian and I have been talking about the DHCP support in the draft since Sol, and even before then. There's concerns for the size of the artifacts when transmitted over DHCP, especially v4, which requires that the entire DHCP response fits inside a single UDP packet with no fragmentation. So this goes back to the boot P protocol days, and of course, you're bootstrapping the device, so you don't have any reassembly mechanisms available at that time, and so everything has to fit inside a single UDP packet. And with concerns for MTUs and transmissions, and with overheads of packet header sizes and whatnot, you really get down to a reusable payload size of something like 500 bytes, and even that needs to be shared amongst other DHCP uses. So Ian raised a concern for this, and we worked together to consider a much more flattened binary representation of what we'd call the unsigned redirect information, just simply a list of IP addresses and ports. So that we had some exchanges on that approach. The flip side is that if you also look at our current approach, how we would encode an unsigned PKCS7 structure, it can fit into that space, the DHCP v4 space, with about 100 bytes to spare. So it actually does fit. I mean, it's about 300 bytes larger than if you were to just use the flat encoding, but it does fit. The flat binary fields, of course, represents the same information in less space, and you could relay more redirections. So recall in this structure, there's a list of redirections, and the device can't get to the first one, then we'll try the second, and then the third. So how many can you fit in there, or would want to fit in there? Probably realistically, I couldn't imagine needing more than a handful, but you can see that already with with two, the approach, when I did the test, it was actually with 2 redirections, so that fit with 100 bytes to spare. Maybe 3 would hit the ceiling. Of course, if you were using the flat binary approach, you'd probably put, I don't know, 10 or 20, and it would fit. On the flip side, if we keep the current artifact definitions, which are the same as used by all the other sources of bootstrapping data, so if you were going to DNS server or a web server like the Bootstrap server that's described in the document, or you're reading the files off of a USB key fob, these are all the same artifacts described by Yang, the Yang encoded artifacts. So if we keep that artifact definition, then of course its architecture is nice and simple to understand. There's no special case for a specific protocol. And it could work better for DHCP v6. You have to fact check me on that, I think. But I think DHCP 6 actually allows for larger sizes, so it could fit. And of course, also, if the networks were known to be purpose-built, they actually had, if they're known to support a larger MTU, then you would also think that you could fit a larger size packet into those. And the reason why this is important is because we really ideally don't only support the unsigned redirect case, we actually would like it to support the signed redirect case, but unsigned is about 500 bytes. When it's signed, now you're talking about 5 kilobytes. So a much larger space, if it was available on DHCP v6 or with larger UDP packet sizes, would be helpful.
Ian Farrar. So just to pitch in a bit on the background on this. I mean, I did some forensics on, is there a maximum DHCP4 packet size? And I mean, there's nothing that's ever been written in RFC that relates to this, but there are.
Can you get a little bit closer to your microphone?
There are a number of discussions that I found, and basically it's not a question of how big is a DHCP4 packet, it's how big is what needs to be supported as a UDP packet. You're much closer to 500.
Please speak a bit closer to the microphone.
I'm going to be swallowing it if I get much closer. Is this?
Yeah, it seems to be necessary. Sorry.
It's not much of a microphone. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, that's better. So, I mean, the question is not one of how big can DHCP4 go. You can't support fragmentation in there because you have to deal with address allocation and, those mechanics of it's not really been a fully formed IP packet. It doesn't run with a normal IP4 type stack behind it, so it can't support fragmentation in most implementations, or you can't assume that it will. You then say, well, what's the IP version 4 UDP size that can be is going to be supported, and you can only guarantee what 576 bytes or something. So you end up with something that's very small there, as being said, to say what can I be absolutely sure any compliant implementation is going to be able to do. DHCP 6 is much easier because you start with 1280 bytes as what needs to be supported in IP6. Fragmentation is also possible here, but I mean the general feeling is not being tried. Should work, but we can't be sure about it. I don't think I would advise going down the lines of saying, let's build something that requires fragmentation here. It would be best avoided if we could do that. But you're right, you can get a lot more into DHCP 6. The question is really, do we want to try and align this between 4 and 6?
Mm-hmm. Right, so this is the open, any other comments? This is the open issue. I'm hoping to get some sense from the room if we should try to have a single definition of an artifact that works also on DHCP v4 with the caveats that we just mentioned, or do we do a flattened binary structure that would potentially also allow us to do a signed redirect? Actually, I don't think not with the amount of space that we have. No, sorry.
It's not going to work in DHCP4. I mean, we'd have to divide it, or or provide unsigned in both DHCP4 and 6, and
So
as with a signed option for 6 possibly.
Right. So in both cases, it'd have to be unsigned. If there's no fragmentation, it'd have to be unsigned. And I guess it's just the size of the how much extra head space do we have?
So for signed, what kind of size do you need?
Well, so as soon as you say signing, then the redirect information, in addition to the IP address and the port, it also has to be a X59 certificate. So if it's DIR encoded, even with the elliptical key, algorithm, you're still probably talking about 300 bytes. So,
wouldn't be a problem in DHCP6.
Right.
Certainly that.
But no, there's that. But then also, in order, you'd actually also then have to have another certificate. And I think I wrote you all in all, it'd be around
I forget
3
the details
kilobytes.
of it, I'm afraid.
It'd be past the fragmentation
Okay,
limit.
so then maybe a redirect is what's needed.
Right. Okay. So I'm sorry, did you?
In that case, I mean, it may just be worth saying that a redirect is going to be needed then to sidestep those kind of problems.
Okay, but then are you saying it's okay to go with the artifact strategy that we're having now, or should we continue to discuss?
I think I emailed you yesterday proposing that we have a get together to go through it, but let's go through this offline, and I think we can come up with something.
Sorry, I missed your email from yesterday.
Okay, it was late last night.
Okay, so we're going to take this one offline and then take it to the list.
So we have 2 more minutes for this part.
Okay. Artifact signing strategy. Currently, artifacts, both ANIMA vouchers and the zero-touch bootstrapping voucher, are signed using PKC7 structure, which is wrapping a JSON encoded document. Just quick statement. It's a Yang defined structure, but we're not supporting the XML encoding. It's just a JSON encoding inside the PKCS7 structure. Of course, when you're talking to a RESTconf server, it could return either a XML or JSON response, but this is binary, so it'd be base64 encoded. But the ANIMA working group is currently talking about using JWT or CWT, and I guess the question for the working group is, should we wait to see what they do, or just stick with our PKCS7 structure for the zero-touch bootstrapping data, and then decouple ourselves from their voucher signing strategy mechanism? Any thoughts about that? So I think my suggestion would be to just stick with the PKC7 structure, decouple ourselves from their working group. I'll ask that or confirm it on the list as well. Last issue, naming. This is actually trivial. I don't want to waste time on this. I'll take it to the list directly. Okay, so final stretch. The draft is, I think, actually ready for last call. It's just this DHCP issue that we need to resolve. But otherwise the open issues are relatively minor. Looking for final reviews, we could actually go for last call very quickly here. Any other comments or concerns?
So an estimate on when do you think you'll be able to close?
So I think that we could resolve our DHCP issue in a couple weeks time, max, if not the end of this week. And then the update to the draft would only take a week after that. And so a final version of draft ready for last call could be in 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
So once you have a proposal, please provide it to the mail list and ask, is there any objection to go that way? So if there is no other comment, we choose your proposal as the way to go.
Okay. Great.
Any other issue before we go to working group last call? So go ahead.
So this is on the suite of documents that includes the key store and all the client and server drafts models. So last time we reported little progress on these drafts. The only real change was made to address the key store renaming issue. But we had said that with zero touch winding down, that the expectation of these drafts would get more attention. We actually did give them a fair amount of attention in this last cycle. I won't go over the specific updates in the interest of time, but you can see there's two slides on all the modifications we've made here. There are just a few open issues. The first is with the key store draft, and the issue is whether or not the private key should be a union, and whether or not we should add back the private key action. To understand this, though, recall that we previously did not have a private key at all. It was hidden, and instead we were assuming that there'd be this action generate private key, but Martin had concerns about there being alternate mechanisms for how configuration could be created. And so what we've done is we've added back the private key. Now it's actually a binary leaf protected by NACM default deny all. Oh, I'm sorry. Each of these issues are touched on in the next slide. So let me actually go to the slide that discusses this issue. Right. So here's the private key, and so it's protected by NACM default deny all. And what I've done is I've created a union of the binary, which would be the private key data itself, as well as with, well, it started off by me having inaccessible, which was trying to articulate the issue of when the private key would be stored inside of a TPM chip, which would never allow the private key to be, you can't extract the private key from the TPM chip. So I wanted some way to provide something that would still pass validation, that, you know, the Yang says that there should be this field and it's currently mandatory true. I mean, yes, we can make it mandatory false, but I was hoping for it to still be mandatory true because it really needs to be there. And then I was providing a value that would indicate that it was not available. This is the reason why it's not available. And then I realized that with NACM default deny all, there's also many cases for why it would not be available for that reason. And I know it's not typical for us to have an enumeration to indicate when the reason why you didn't get the field was because NACM restricted it. But many times with NACM, we're talking about like an element in a list, and you're just simply not getting the entire element. So from a Yang validation perspective, it's still a valid document. But here we're talking about a particular leaf that's missing, and it's actually not a valid document if it's missing, unless, of course, we make it mandatory false. Question?
So Martin Birkeland, yeah. This solution will not really work because if the key is denied, if the leaf is denied via NACM, you will not even see the restricted enumeration, right? So it will not be there in the reply. And also it's configuration, so having these enumerations in the configuration looks a bit weird because it means that the client will provide them. I don't think there's actually a problem of having it mandatory true and still being denied for most users. You know, that's fine. It just means that whenever a user that has access to this structure creates something, it needs to provide a value for the private key.
Okay, so in this, there's actually two enums here. The restricted one is related to NACM, so that one disappears. The other one, inaccessible, to something to capture the case for when the private key is simply not available because it's protected by a TPM chip. Keep that.
So why would it, yeah. So what in the model tells you that it's protected by the chip? Is that
this is it? This is what I'm thinking.
So if you want to create a key in that chip, you would actually create this configuration with the value inaccessible?
No. So first off, the device will be shipped from manufacturing with a pre-configured private key for its IDEV certificate. But then above and beyond that, I think we should add back the generate private key RPC, which would affect operational state, you know, as we're, you know, it's not affecting configuration, it's affecting operational state. So it's generating operational state. And then if someone wants to configure a certificate for that private key, it would be in configuration with, you know, effectively having the same key value as the, I mean, so you don't see it here, but we're inside of a list with a name. So it would be referencing that same list element as exists inside operational. And so you're just providing a certificate for a value that exists in operational. It's kind of like what we were saying with the topology model, the overlay pointing to the underlay, that kind of concept.
In that case, it would be possible to actually create a key with the same name, but you would still set a real key with a binary here. What happens in that case?
No, it wouldn't. Oh, I see what you're saying. So, well, no, it would. Okay, so let's take this one off. I know what you're saying.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
and also in that case, I think maybe better name that.
I think we should take this offline.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so we just talked about this, adding it back. I think we would need to do this to support for the case. I mean, not only is there some need for when you generate the key inside a chip, but there's also just generally best practice, not to load a private key onto a system, to instead ask the system to generate the private key. It's generally best practice. Okay, so that's it for key store. Moving on to, actually, I'm going to click back a couple here. This issue is both with the SSH client and also the TLS client server. It's the same issue. The simplified client auth, is it okay for call home apps, right? So, what we have in the draft works great for traditional clients and also for call home apps that want to use the same client auth for all devices. So, in the traditional sense, if you're a client, you're SSHing to a device, you know exactly which auth you want to use, which username, which password or RSA key. But when devices are calling home to the client, it could be many different kinds of devices, and maybe your auth changes by device. And so you could, see it as, mutable. As the draft currently has it, it would be the same auth for regardless which device calls into the client. So for all the devices, it would be the same. And in this case, well, for SSH, it would be the same username and credentials, and for TLS, it would just be the same client certificate. Okay, so, and I guess this is the question. If that's okay. And my thought about this is, and actually I think it goes on to the next slide, is that, oh no, I'm sorry, it's just here. This discussion is related to a question in NetConf and RESTConf. So yeah, this is the issue. Well, maybe I should go ahead and move on to the next issue because it is kind of related. We'll come back to this. So should NetConf RESTConf client be a grouping? So remember that on the previous slide we were talking about the SSH and TLS client. Well, the RESTConf and NetConf clients would use the SSH and TLS clients. So that's how these two open issues are related. Currently, the NetConf and RESTConf clients are containers. Okay, so I mean, if you think about when NetConf and RESTConf servers, it makes sense to use containers. They're actually, you could configure it. You assume that server's backend must implement the modules that it claims to support through Hello Message or Yang library. But clients are different, I think. Clients must have business logic of some sort to do something. Specifically, a NetConf or RESTConf client needs to be linked into an application that orchestrates its function. So it seems to me that this being the case, how can a client ever be configured on its own? And shouldn't actually the application be the thing that's getting configured? And instead of the NetConf, RESTConf clients being containers, maybe they should be groupings. Any thoughts on that? I see one person nodding. Any more?
Second is here.
Oh, okay. Well, assuming that this is true, and so it's really the application that needs to get configured, and actually business logic needs to be linked into that client application, then going back to the previous slide, it seems to me that in the most simplest applications, the default client auth, a single form of client auth for call home support would be acceptable, and any application that wanted to do anything something more robust would just define their more robust mechanism and not use the simple SSH or TLS client grouping that we've defined here. So it resolves both issues if we change the NetConf RESTConf client from a container to a grouping. and assume the application will handle it. All right, so I'll take that to the list with that being my proposal. And so next steps, we'll just work through these remaining issues, complete the call home reference implementation. I was actually hoping to do it during the hackathon, but I couldn't. The good news is the developers of the OpenSSH and the Maverick SSH have worked together to resolve issues that have been plaguing me the last couple IETFs, so I'll be able to do it now. The syslog draft has been updated to make reference to the key store and also the TLS client. And I don't think the PCE PCEP app draft has been updated yet, but the authors have told me that they plan to update it to also use the key store and the TLS client. And then we'll be ready for last call.
Mehmet, I wonder whether we indeed should wait on the other implementation after this go to working group last call. Is this really necessary?
I for one would love to see more implementations. I mean, it's one
yeah,
thing.
we all want to see the implementations, but in many cases we don't have them during publication. They come after publication. Do you think they will be on time? How long will we wait on them? So there is no time definition, so it's uncertain for my person.
I can speak to the syslog draft since it's going through the netmod list, and that has been updated as of Monday morning. And I plan to meet with Clyde Wilds this week or shortly. I already looked at the updates; they seemed reasonable. I think it could go. Well, actually, he was resolving a last call comments, but it's going to have to go through another quick last call. But it's probably about a month away from
you mean the finalization of the document?
No, till we do the last call for the final last call for syslog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't speak.
But you have on the slide implementation.
No, for implementation, I don't know. Maybe you have some comments, but no. In terms of implementations, there are no active implementations on the client parts, like the TLS client, SSH client. So my reference implementation does the SSH server.
Yeah, your reference implementation is fine, but I think we shouldn't wait on other implementations.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. You gave us a few minutes. Thank you for that. Eric.
All right, I'm going to do an update on the subscription event draft notifications. We've had probably 6 meetings of a subset of the people in this room since the last working group meeting. We've concluded that we've gotten through the major issues. We're very close to having and presenting this to working group last call. I'm going to go through on some of these drafts what the final topics worth discussing are. We have proposals out there, but based on the interactions and hopefully the meeting minutes that we've been sending to the working group alias, people are mostly up to date on what the latest are. So a lot of people have worked on this. I'm not going to name everybody here now, but the draft should be in fairly decent shape. Now, one of the things I want to kind of step back and do is take a look at, why we're going down this path. If you look at, just do a pointer here. Yep. If you look at the major question, there's a question of data replication frequency versus latency. And certain things happen really quickly or very often. Things like routing table updates can happen in the sub-second range. Some things happen very slow. Let's say updating a new software version or a crypto key, that might change very slowly. But whether it happens fast or slow, there might be a need for notifications to be provided on those events very quickly. Things like a software version, if it turns out a hacker is out there and they're messing with your system, you want to know if somebody's updated your system software very quickly. So you might have to have a very quick return of a second or so in changing so the configuration information is out there, even though it happens very infrequently. Likewise, ACLs, somebody could be doing updates to ACLs and 2 controllers might be working the same system. In order to have those controllers stay in sync, you better make sure that you let the other systems know when those updates are being made. So there's a relationship between how fast things are happening and a relationship with how quickly you have to know about those things for a whole bunch of new business models to be supportable. That's what really drove the beginning of the push notifications. We have things like SNMP and CLI, which we know aren't good enough for the push protocols to deliver notifications as they're happening. We have stuff like routing protocols down in here, which are for fast-moving, fast-changing things that don't work for controllers and for the change of configuration or other data that is not typically provided. So understanding that there's a whole new pile of stuff that we can enable with push protocols and Yang models is how this got started. Now, we had a functional partitioning that you've seen in previous meetings. We have updated it as a working group. Basically, we have the existing drafts that we've talked about, and the existing drafts support subscribe notifications for what was 5277 type events. As you've seen on the mailing list, we've moved away from 5277. We will let parallel implementations exist in the same box. So we have existing notifications. We also have Yang Data Store Push, which builds on top of the notification subscription mechanisms. We have the transport over NetConf and RESTconf, and there is a new draft which Mehmet mentioned earlier, looking at data plane notifications. These will not be necessarily required for early implementations, but they can provide different functions, which we'll talk about later. So the functionality per draft, again, you guys have seen earlier versions of this, but it just shows what's in subscribe notifications, what's in data store push, as well as the transport and the RESTconf HTTP2 transports. What's new in the Yang notifications 2 draft is the encapsulation of certain header objects. There are certain header objects in Yang notifications which should be common across different types of implementations. Do we want to do signatures? Do we want to provide a means of application layer deduplication? These are the kind of things that we'll mention a little bit later. Bundled records and the ability to group many records into one push is something that we haven't defined in Yang, but we've seen that need. GNMI, which has come out recently, has also proposed the need for bundling multiple push events together to be able to be sent out as a group. So this is pretty much the same breakdown that we've talked about as previously, with just the potential for a new notifications draft as a future work identified. This just shows the drafts in a layered framework. This, again, does not change much from what we had before. The real difference is we're talking about possibly a new bundling function that would go along with the event generation phase. And again, subscriptions come, and the control plane happens on the left side, and then the push comes off of effectively the revised data store draft that's being worked in concert with netmod, and that push information goes ahead over top of Yang and NetConf and RESTconf and out the other side. Again, not a whole lot new here. So what has changed since the last go around? Well, we have some new additions. We added the ability to put operational data into for how many data store updates happened. So if you want to be able to go to the Yang model and say, oh, I pushed 10 notifications, you can go to the operational model there. If you want to see, oh, I threw away 5 notifications because they didn't meet my filter, you can see that. So the ability to pull out operational data is in there. We have something that Bala's helped spearhead, which is notifiable on change. This allows you to identify nodes in your Yang schema as supporting the ability to push things on change. We have some new features in there. We have error and hint mechanisms that allow for some negotiation to give you ideas on what the acceptable parameters might be for certain fields. If you're going to turn down a notification, it can provide hints via the error codes on what might be acceptable. And we have some new examples. But other than that, the draft stays the same. Now, before we're really looking to go to working group last call, we need to highlight a couple things on the list. These are things that I think we have a position on, but it's good to just get you guys, double checking it before we go ahead and say it's done. One of these is the idea of a subscription ID as an identifier, which is a locally relevant identifier. Now, what does that mean? with NACM, what happens if you have two different receivers and they're going to be having their objects filtered differently? You can have the same subscription ID for a configured subscription, but provide different updates to different receivers if they have different security parameters set. And knowing that we're actually going to make sure that a single update that is assigned to a subscription ID has different versions or different deliveries to those different boxes is something that that is a reality, and we probably should do. But we'll go ahead and confirm that on the list if the idea of making sure that the subscription ID and a single update can result in different pushes to two different boxes. Andy.
Andy Bierman, want to clarify. I don't know if it was decided that the access control should work at runtime or subscription startup. Now, what I plan to implement is, if you don't have access for everything you ask for, you don't get it. If we change NACM on you on the fly, we're going to suspend your subscription until you fix it. I'm not going to do this NACM on the fly to make a different version of the packet for everybody. That's really difficult.
Understood. So Andy's question really is, do we want to make sure it be done on the fly? Right now, the spec doesn't say it should be done on the fly or not. It just says that you have to cover it. So there's nothing that says you must do it on the fly within the drafts. So that's one issue. The other issue.
One quick question on that. Dave Woltemeyer, can that be addressed through a security consideration? Could we say that you know, by not directly enforcing it on an ACL change, you may end up propagating events that may not be authorized, or something like that? You could. The question is it required to put it in the draft that you might have that behavior in there? I mean, the idea of saying you could do this, it's probably worth mentioning to the implementer just so that they're aware that there's a potential security risk. Yes, and how that's implemented. We do have some text about this in the security considerations section. If you want to add or enhance that text or suggest how else to frame it, that'd be great. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you. All right, the question on deferring standard header and bundle support, it's not really deferral. We're just saying it's not in scope, at least in this draft. And so we'll talk about that more later. One other issue that I did not highlight here that I want to just make sure that we get on the list before we close on it is that a Yang patch that is pushed can report that you're going to do a delete on a deleted item or a non-existent item, or an add to an item which already exists. And this is an essential behavior because if you have something like multiple events occurring and you're only providing the last one, there might have been multiple changes and you're reporting the last change. We'll confirm that on the list, but other than that, I think the issues are pretty much closed on Yang push. Again, hopefully we can do working group last call. At least I know one reference implementation and two others that that are partial implementations. Maybe other people know as well. Next slide, updates from subscribe notifications. We have added kill subscription RPC, so an operator can go ahead and kill somebody's subscription that they want to. That's probably pretty useful. We moved away from 5277 per all the emails you saw on the list, and for the reasons we talked about on the list. We have new error conditions, and we simplified the Yang model as a result of getting away from 5277. And we renamed subscription state notifications from control plane notifications. And per Martin's suggestion, we've renamed some of the things in the model per identifiers. Martin, I think we've covered most of the requirements or suggestions you made earlier. If there's anything you see there that we missed, let us know. So the same exact issues for subscribe notifications as with Yang push, same issues. Hopefully we can close those out. Now, RESTconf and HTTP2 update since last IETF. We removed a lot of sections that were redundant. We pulled away third-party subscriptions as out of scope. And finally, we have SSE, which is only used with RESTconf and HTTP 1.1. That actually was something we talked about the last IETF, but I don't think it actually made the release draft. So the fact that SSE is only a RESTconf issue and that we're using just regular HTTP2 mechanisms is part of what's in the current draft.
Last issue before working group last call, we had a couple attempts to get a mapping of HTTP2 transport to gRPC just so that we could claim message interoperability, message compatibility. I had one meeting with Eric Anderson, was not able to continue those meetings. If we can't get more sets of eyes, we're going to do our best, but we do not have message compatibility completely. I would love to get it. If there's anybody who wants to volunteer to do the gRPC stuff to make sure that our messages aren't in conflict, great. Otherwise, we're just going to declare victory and move ahead. But we've done our best to match to what's in the HTTP2 to gRPC. Note of NETCONF, we have an update shortly. We're waiting the charter conclusion, and the main author of the draft had just not quite got to it by the time we closed out. Which brings us to the last item, notifications 2. It's a new draft that Andy, Alex, and I have been working on, and it really brings up a set of questions. Initially, I was confused as to whether they were questions that belonged in netmod or netconf. I think the consensus is it should be netconf rather than netmod, but because these things are relevant to Yang and notifications are not transport related issues, there has been some questions about where does it exactly land. Now, the things that are important here are what are the transport header objects which are going to be associated with the notification no matter where it comes from. We don't have any agreement on what those headers should be, and there's some pretty obvious headers. We'll look at the next slide. Second thing is, how do you bundle many notifications into one transportable message? These are things which we should have. I mean, the idea of having to send messages one by one can get pretty inefficient for a couple types of deployments. And finally, how do you troubleshoot, which is just a final question. Now, let's take a look at transport agnostic header objects. What are we talking about things that should be independent of transport that applications might care about? I work a lot with the security applications that sometimes do not get tied to a particular transport. Container-based applications where they might want to sign an object, sign a message, and send it off to somebody else to transport. And in that case, they want to do things like get a signature associated with the message that will be transported that can be discarded on the other end. Now, they could make that part of the message, or we could agree on supporting a signature as a grouped item. Observation domain ID versus generator ID. What happens if you have multiple line cards and you want to make sure that you're identifying what process actually identified the and generated the information rather than the thing that pushed it? This is something that has been identified as a need all the way over in IPFix. And so knowing who's generating the information is stuff that should be common across a lot of applications. Record severity, is it high, medium, low? Record ID, record type, is it an alarm? Is it an event? Is it a data store push? These are all the kind of things that should be agreed to across different vendors in order to make sure the same information is being delivered across. So all these kind of items should be the kind of headers that we want in a notification, which would be independent of a vendor that we should have identified in an update notification. Are these things that you guys want to work on? This is the open question about whether this draft gets adopted. Not only that, but bundling multiple notification messages into a single transportable message. The idea of having a single header for many different updates and bundling many updates together means that, again, you can get the efficiency of grouping things and sending them as one package. And as soon as you get to that, you get into questions such as, when was the record generated, the notification generated, versus when was it actually sent off the box? A lot of implementations out there often couple the notification time with the event generation time. And if they're different, that can really cause a lot of problems. So separating the time something was generated from when it was pushed off the box is the kind of thing that we really should nail down into a common definition. Certainly there are a lot of implementations out there which merge the two. So I guess this is the last slide, and what I want to kind of end with is, do people care enough about the bundling question as well as the common data plane header questions to continue the discussions on the mailing list and see if people want to start talking about these common bundling mechanisms or header mechanisms and progress it towards something that might be a working group draft? So with that summary, I just want to see if people find the bundling and the common headers issues interesting. If not, we can move away from it, but at least it seems to be to me.
Any comments?
No one interested? We don't have to progress it.
So you are not asking for adoption immediately? You would like to discuss it? Is this correct, what I understood?
I want to see if anybody else is interested before we ask for adoption. We haven't gotten much commentary, so I don't want to ask for adoption before we have commentary.
Rob Wilson's Cisco sounds useful to me.
There's one. Anyone else? And no, I didn't pay him to do that.
Yeah, Cisco is fine.
Martin Björklund, yeah, I also think that this would be useful, but isn't this required for the NetConf mapping of notifications? I mean, either we have this or we have what we already have, right?
Yes, the question really is what should be transport independent. Again, as I mentioned, I work with a lot of security apps. They don't really care about what's transport under them. They don't want to bind to one transport. So unless we identify, if we can identify those headers, and we don't have to worry about transport dependent bindings. And that's what we're trying to get to, at least I'm trying to get to, is some of the things that should be independent of that naming.
Yeah, but the transport protocol document will have to say something about what is being sent as a notification.
Absolutely.
Right? So it probably needs a reference to this. Even though this is transport protocol agnostic, which is fine, the transport protocol document will need to reference this.
Absolutely. And so what we have is we're going, at least with the first 4 drafts, on the existing mechanisms. Once this is adopted, we can go ahead and say, oh, by the way, if you want to use that, then do this mapping. It should be really simple, but we're not trying to hold up the original drafts for the bundling or the common headers yet.
So just to be clear, so if we don't have this thing and we publish the rest of the documents, we would still use the old format for notifications.
Yes, if you want to be following all the standards, you can do that. If you want to do something else, you can still do a new notification, but it won't be standard. I think that's a yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Bhushan from AT&T.
Can you please state your name?
Bhushan.
Okay.
Yeah. So bundling is very useful for us. I mean, thank you for that. But what I recommend is having a subdivided module of bundling, like a topic-wise bundling. If I have 5 types of notification, it should be of 5 types. So I don't have to go and search for my type in the notifications from the API or from the applications.
All right, we should communicate offline because grouping the bundling types is something we had not considered yet. It was kind of no guidelines on that.
Okay. And my second question is, like, if I'm receiving 5 notifications, like maybe it's alarm, and I want to check the severity of the alarm, like I want to receive only major critical alarms. So what is the filter type you are putting on the applications? I mean, is there any functionality for that?
Well, what we have is we do have filters for what actually generates into an event as part of the existing subscription drafts. So you won't generate an event. The question of what's the priority in bundling, there's no rules right now on how to create your bundle. It's just what the bundle is. There's no reason why you couldn't have some process that identifies members of the bundle and creates the bundles independent of anything we've specified so far.
Yeah, because sometimes what happens is, like, we are not looking for all minor alarms or notifications. We are only interested in major because we have to take action against it. So this filter is very much necessary. Absolutely.
And it would be fairly straightforward since we already have the priority and the subscription QoS model to define the QoS such that the priority, anything with a severity high or whatnot would go its own bundle, and then you'd have use the HPQoS or other mechanisms to make sure that gets and goes in front of all the others. That would be very straightforward.
So we have 1 minute left.
Okay, so last question.
Sure.
So once this notification is received on the application, is it like deleted or stored for some time in it?
That's the third item in there. We actually have a Yang model to do random access or read access on the notifications. So the Yang model for actually looking up notifications after they've been sent is there. Whether it would be implemented is a question of, do people actually want to store and have Yang model access to existing notifications? The draft that's out there does provide a Yang model for that, but it does not say that it actually is implemented and accessible behind the scenes. But a Yang model for random access is provided in that draft.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
One last?
yeah, go ahead.
Just my question on caching the notifications on the box. I think if you're going to do bundling, you'll have to cache the notifications anyway on the box.
Yes, you are going to cache notifications. The question is not whether they're cached, is whether you want random access to them based on a Yang model. So the Yang model can be there, but it doesn't mean that somebody's going to actually instrument the linkages to that local storage.
Okay, so your proposal is to have some discussion on the mail list and ask for adoption on the mail list?
Exactly, because now people have actually said they want it. Okay,
let's do so. Thank you. Andy, can you just give a verbal summary on NACOM? As I heard, you are done.
Okay, the latest draft just had an update to the RESTConf reference and nothing else. And we think it's ready for working last call. We're not adding any more features. Haven't got any more comments from last time. So I think we just go to working group last call.
Okay. So the question here is, can we go to last call? Is there anybody who sees any issue which should be solved before going to last call? If there is no objection, we will then initiate the last call. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, now we are coming to the fun part. The charter proposal was on the mail list actually 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know, some weeks. There were comments we got, etc. And we updated several times. Some work is focusing on finalizing ongoing work. Others are new, which were not on the charter yet, like notification, subscription, etc. Yeah, so the last version we provided to Benoit was also available to the mail list, and Benoit yeah, got it and modified a little bit, simplified the text as far as I understand, which is valuable. So please, Benoit, explain a little bit your changes.
Right, so I am Benoit. The changes I made were in the introduction mainly. What we've seen in industry is that we have NetConf, we have RESTConf, we have multiple protocols. So first of all, something that maybe was unnoticed is that the NetConf, which was standing for NetConf protocol, right? It was changed to network configuration, right? So I wanted to stress that. I wanted also to make sure that this working group is the working group whose scope is responsibility for all the protocols, developments and maintenance of protocols for data models, which are done with Yang. So data modeling driven management done with Yang, the transport, this is the place. This is what I've been trying to explain in the first paragraph.
Okay, I assume you guys know the charter proposal. It is on the mail list already a long time. I will not go through here line by line, etc. Or we don't. I mean, we are not organizing an editing session or something like this. One or two things to mention immediately are the notification 2 draft from Eric has been noted in the charter proposal as potential work to do. We have in point 6 the preparation or development of NetConf and RESTConf BIS documents. which will use the revised data store document as the basis of the BIS document. If there is anything else to add, we will see. This means we are, in a way, dependent on the finalization of the revised data store document in NetMod working group. This will be then used for NetConf ResConf BIS. The last point which has been added recently is concerning the NetConf ResConf extensions to support I2RS protocol and ephemeral state data store requirements from I2RS. We will talk on this in a few minutes. Sue will present what she proposes to do there. This is it actually. There is no big change, only text simplification. Some parts have been removed just to make it more simple. Phil?
Phil Schaefer, Juniper. There's a line there, XML NetConf encoding rules will be moved from...
This has been removed. Renaud, did you send out your changes to the mail list? You were planning to do so?
Yes, I did well in advance of the working meeting, which is like 10 minutes before.
Yeah, okay. Please look at it. This is available to the mail list. We will go after this session in a particular review period. I don't know how many days, but we should have a deadline for such a review. In any case, after this, it will go through the usual process to ISG, etc.
That's right.
So you see here the old text which I provided. The new text is actually a simplification of the text here. Some parts have been removed just to make it more straightforward. Is there any other comment on the charter proposal? Okay, so we wanted to have now or prepared a slot especially to enable a discussion on related documents between NetConf, NetMod, I2RS. One particular document which was already in discussion is the revised data store document. Recently, the 4 co-chairs from NetMod, NetConf, and Benoit, we had a joint call and came to the conclusion it should be a standard track document, and this has been announced already on the mail list by Benoit. I just wanted to restate it. This is the way we are going. And NetConf and the ResConf BIS documents will use the result or the finalization of the revised concept being done in NetMod. NetConf and ResConf extensions required from I2RS point of view will be done in NetConf working group because they are related to and part of NetConf ResConf protocols, and they belong together. As I said, Sue will present on this in a minute. Is there anything else to mention? So as we are, doing related work between the working groups, this is now the time to discuss if there is any issue and improve the charter text for NetConf and NetMod, and then just do the development based on those charter definitions. Nothing else to say on the charter? Okay, let's go then to the interesting topic, impact of DS concept on NetConf-RESTConf. This will be something NetConf needs to do pretty soon. I assume people have read the appendix of the revised status or document, but Martin will explain a few details.
Yeah, and yeah, okay. So this is the presentation about the revised data store and specifically how it affects the protocols, NetConf and RESTConf. So first, just a quick recap of the problem. I already mentioned this morning in the NetMod meeting, but very quickly. In the current model that NetConf defines, it's not possible to access the operational state separately from running. So we have the get operation that returns both operational state and running, and this led to data model duplication, where you had to separate the configuration subtree from the state subtree. In the revised data store, we propose a solution to this, and that is to have a separate operational data store. So this picture shows the data stores that we propose. Of course, candidate startup and running are the same as we already have in NetConf. And then we propose a new intended data store and the operational data store. So from a protocol perspective, it's of course necessary to be able to read those data stores and get the interesting data out of them. So we already have mechanisms, get config to read from candidate startup and running, but not from intended and not from operational. So for NetConf, we see two options. We see that we can either define what is needed as a separate capability in a separate document without touching the NetConf document at all, or we incorporate this into a new NetConf version. And I think from the author's point of view, we prefer the first version to define this as a separate capability. Anyways, the changes will be similar in both cases. It's just a matter of if we do them separately or incorporate them into the base protocol. So what we need is a new capability so that the server can advertise support for these new data stores. And we need a new protocol operation, maybe called getData, that can be used to retrieve the contents of these data stores. So getConfig cannot really be used. I mean, it could have been used to also retrieve operational state, but it seems kind of odd. So we propose this new getData. We should probably look at this get2 operation, which had some good parameters. If we do this, if we actually define a new version of NetConf, 2.0, 1.2, I don't know, we should probably remove the get operation. Yeah.
So question. So what happens to the semantics of get in the meantime?
It doesn't change. It's the same.
By remove, you mean deprecate?
What's that?
By remove, you mean deprecate?
Not if we do a new version. Then we can remove it in that version, right? So if you have a server that wants to support, you can still do that in the old version.
But that means your client would have to detect which version he's talking to. Before
Well, the client already will detect that, hopefully.
Well, I'd rather see them continue to be supported so a client a client that's doing get config can continue to work.
But a client can probably not talk to a server that only implements, an old client can probably not even talk to a server that only implements the new version, unless the client parses the capability string and tries to figure out that it's a new version of the same thing. But that's not, I don't think that works.
I don't think there's any reason to intentionally break them. We can carry get config forward. I don't know about get.
Oh, get config, yes, but
yeah.
Get is probably not a good.
Get's useless. So
I thought you said get.
So it was useless and it will remain useless.
I thought you said get.
But get config, I think should be deprecated, not removed.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Alex Kram, would you need also an operation basically with this that allows it to get the differences between two data stores? Same data, same difference in values? Possibly. Possibly, yes. I don't think it's, I mean, it's not required per se, but it's probably useful anyway.
Yeah, I think it would be useful, given.
Andy Bierman, I'm concerned about breaking stuff that already works. And if we can only, according to Yang 1.1, we can only implement one revision of a module inside the server. So if you update IETF98-NETCONF-20170328-1640 and you take out GET, there's no way for me to implement it. We have customers using GET to retrieve operational data. Okay, they didn't get the memo that they have to combine everything together, so they have trees that are config false. They use GET, they retrieve config false. It's the only way in NetConf they can do that. Because you do a GET on config false with, I mean, a GET config on config false, you get nothing, right? So you're removing something really important from NetConf. If you deprecate is fine. Leave it in as deprecated for a while, and then you have something better that people can migrate to retrieve config false data, then that would work. But I mean, just removing removing it doesn't take away, doesn't fix anything.
So again, the proposal from us would be to not do a new version of the protocol. Instead, add this as a separate capability, and in that case, GET is untouched.
Good. All right, that'll work fine.
So there are these two options, and that's something that working group will have to talk about. Okay, further implications. We suggest that we add a new filtering mechanism so that we can filter data based on metadata annotations. So in the operation data store, the data is tagged with an origin attribute so they can know where data came from into the operation data store. So it would be useful to be able to filter on that attribute. And this is actually more generic than just the origin attribute. It works or should work for any attribute defined using the RFC 7952. So essentially, what we propose is a new capability with metadata that works just like, or sort of like with defaults, that allows a client to request the inclusion of these metadata annotations in the reply, and also a filter mechanism to filter data based on the origin or other attributes. And for RESTconf, it's very similar. Either we do this as an additional capability on the side and do not touch the protocol, or we rev the protocol and do a new version of RESTconf. So again, we suggest that we just add this as a new capability. What is needed is very similar. We need a new RESTconf capability to support, for the server to advertise what it supports. We suggest a new URL path. Under the RESTconf root, you would have a data store / name of the data store, like operational, and then the data. At least we're running an operational, but could also be done for the other data stores. I guess this is something to discuss if we want to support all the different data stores in RESTconf or not. Originally, the idea with RESTconf was to provide a somewhat simplified version of a heavy netconf, so maybe we shouldn't even support all of them. And the same thing if we do a new version of RESTconf, like RESTconf 2.0, we can remove this combined data tree. And Andy will have the same comment on this one as for GET, I guess. And further, we propose to have the same kind of mechanisms for filtering based on the origin attribute in RESTconf, just as we do for NetConf. It's just that in RESTconf, it's done with query parameters, whereas in NetConf, it's done differently with filters. So, yeah, that's it. Any other comments?
So Rob Wilton, Cisco. So I think one thing to clarify here is one of the advantages we see as doing this as a optional capability rather than a new version is I think we perceive that would be quicker to actually get this through the process and get it out, which is quite a big advantage.
And this, of course, relates to the charter discussion, because in the current charter, I think it actually says a new version of the protocol. But if it's not needed, then I guess we don't have to do a new version.
We actually did not say a new protocol version.
Okay, good.
We just said BIS draft, right?
Okay. But I think
it should be actually open. I mean, we didn't want to decide with the charter what it should be.
Right. So any comments from the working group?
But in any case, we need some discussion on the mail list to come to a conclusion. The proposal is clear, the reasons are clear, but we still need some discussion at least before we can come to a conclusion. We cannot hurry that much. So.
Yeah. And I guess what we need to do is provide an individual document or two individual documents, one for RESCONF, one for NetConf, I guess.
I assume so, yes. But as I said, we are not deciding anything here and now immediately, so we should have a discussion on this. And the proposals are, but I mean, maybe you can describe your proposal on the mail list again a bit more clearly. So your basic proposal to go for new capabilities instead of a new version, I didn't see it on your slide.
No, you said.
Yeah, he said,
I just listed the two different options, and I said that we prefer.
So maybe you can state your proposal more clearly, more directly.
It says to define new capabilities.
But the proposal I heard verbally is to go for capabilities, not for new version. Okay. This is not clear on the slide. I mean, we need kind of clear and direct proposals, then we can decide, conclude on this as consensus. Lada?
Lada Hutka, I'm not sure that if really this base URL is changed, that it can be a capability, because that would mean that clients that do not support this cannot read anything from.
No, it wouldn't change. It would just add to. Would be a new resource, right? Or two new resources.
Okay, but I understand that.
No,
that was there. So you are saying there that a new path for at least running and operational. So it means what's normally now under, I think, data store data will be data store running data, right?
So the old one would still work just as before.
Okay, so it will be just an
I
additional.
mean, if we do this as a separate capability, the old nothing is touched, you know, in the base protocol. We're just adding a new thing.
Okay, so.
Okay.
I know. Benoit Clay. So the meeting is there to make decisions. So you propose like capabilities, and I would like to understand if this is like what you should be doing, right? So can we just get a sense of the room or any objections? Because you will be working on documents right now. So
yes,
can we make progress?
All right. So with Martin's proposal to go and define this as new capabilities for both NetConf and RESCONF, can we have a show of hands to say you would like to go ahead with this proposal? So show of hands if you want to proceed with the current proposal from Martin. All right. Anyone has any objections to the proposal? Okay. None. So noted.
Okay, so then the next step would be to do an individual draft or two individual drafts with all the details, and then we can.
Yes, we can then roll that into a group document.
Okay, good.
I'm very pleased to see Martin's proposal accepted. Okay, these are kickstarts for ideas. You can go to the next slide. The chairs wanted me to be brief, so one slide fits all. So there are two ways to do this. There is to go from the NetConf and the revised data stores toward I2S, and there is the other direction to go from I2S requirements toward the revised data store. Martin's stuff took a more general thing and came from the revised data stores draft toward maybe some work in I2S. I'm taking the other approach just to highlight things that might be useful. So if you go with Martin's proposal, 3 cheers for, I'm going to start with RESTConf and then go to NetConf. You know, why does NetConf always get to go first? Maybe because it was, but okay, guys, that was fun. I got all sorts of, that wasn't pejorative or anything. Let me start with NetConf after that look. If you do that, I think that Martin suggested get data. Martin, did you suggest read data? Write data? That's what I thought. I maybe was blanked out. Write data, read data. In IRTS, you have to deal with write collisions. RESTConf already deals with it. You can take the IRTS write collision mechanism and map the client and priority to the edit collision. I'm sure that's because Andy's just really, really smart and knew what he was doing. Yes, that was a compliment, Andy. Sorry, I snuck that in there. And the only thing you, if you look at read and write data, you have to deal with the write collision. The way that RESTConf does it is probably fine if you wanted to borrow it. All you have to do is map with the time indicator and the identity indicator. You can map the client ID and the priority into the identity tag, and then IRTS people can do the same. So there's not a lot of changes. If you want to do something more specific, we can unroll that based on the RESTConf, since it's already pretty much in here. You might have to modify kill session and close session. I don't know if you thought about that for NetConf, how you'd actually kill session and close session, Martin? Okay, well, that was one of the other things you might want to include and look at. I didn't know if there was a cross work with rollback. That's a common one because IRTS has a rollback of all or nothing. And again, I don't know the cross hatching between what Martin was thinking of. There is 2 specific additional things you would need to figure out how we would pass. Secondary ID, should it be metadata, should it be something else? And then there's ephemeral. And I'm going to state that once you get through all the other things, ephemeral is sort of this other case. Once you've done all the great work for revised data stores, whether they be dynamic or just other data stores, pretty much you're down to, is this node ephemeral? The same thing is even better true in RESTConf. Andy, I dug and dug, and if you give up validation, if you make the validation specific to the implementation, I can't find anything to add to RESTConf other than supporting ephemeral. Now let me bring up verbally the last one. This is a teaser, since I have, how am I doing on my time?
You're doing good.
Okay. This is a teaser. We will go through the absolute details of some of the suggestions and draft. The question is validation. How do you do the cross data store work and validation? And we've really got to settle on how you want to think about that so we can figure out, you know, if it's just read reference, are we okay? Is that something that's really validation if someone wants more validation? Okay, so that's my teaser. Quite frankly, most of the people, and I don't mean to, most of the people I've surveyed and talked to would rather have for IRTS RESTConf. And I don't know if there's a problem with suggesting for the IRTS work that RESTConf would be mandatory to implement instead of NetConf. Is that ever done? Is there a problem with that? I just, it's point of information. I don't know who's the expert in that state.
Kent Watson, Juniper Networks. In the guidelines for dynamic data stores, there's a discussion, I think, where it says the dynamic data store gets to choose which protocols can interact with it. So you're free to say it's only accessible by RESTConf.
Right, that's in NetConf. I'm just wanting, thank you, Kent, for putting that in. Very great, and all the other revised data stores. But the people in IR2S who I've talked to really want to start with RESTConf as mandatory to implement. Did I do something else wrong, Lou?
No. Hi, Lou Berger. Speaking as someone who's active in the routing area, I think, sorry, I guess this is the, sorry. As someone active in the routing area, I think most of us in that area are trying really hard to get to the point where once we've designed the model, we don't try to tie it to a specific protocol, meaning all our model work is model agnostic. And
right,
so
model work is all model agnostic.
You're right. So you'll be the only place, I think, in the routing area that would limit yourself to one protocol while everyone else is trying to...
We won't limit ourselves to one protocol, just we don't want to have to implement NetConf to get IR2's capabilities. Different thing.
Okay, I think you're doing something different, but that's okay.
If I said something different, will someone tell me what I said?
I think you're doing something different than other folks in the routing area, but that's okay. I2S can be different.
I'm just telling you what I've heard. For those who are coming to IR2S, please tell me what you want. If you want truly agnostic, it's just the thing is the people who I've surveyed, and again, I've talked to some of the people in the working group. Tomorrow, our session will be more informative, said they really, for the applications they suggest IR2S, they'd prefer to swap the mandatory. Any questions? This is a teaser, all the walking through detail because of times in the group. We're not double dipping, we're sort of doing it one group. Wow, that's cool. I'm done.
Thank you, Sue.
I guess the details in I2RS, I guess it meets tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow.
The other slide, go one further. Okay. Binal, do you want to give a short summary on gRPC?
So not a summary, but more an announcement that in the routing working group, we will have two different drafts discussed. One is about the gRPC use case, and the other one is about GNMI network management interface. So feel free to attend. So I'm not going to speak for the authors, but and they have some feedback on the way to use Yang and all this.
One question I would like to ask is there any interest in routing area to work on gRPC, or do we want to work on gRPC in ops area?
So that's a question for the author of the draft. If they want to standardize, I don't have the answer. And then why routing? I think it's because they were invited, but I let Jeff speak. He's the chair.
Okay,
of the
sure,
routing group.
sure.
So by routing, gRPC has been implemented by every major routing vendor, and there's 7 implementation of gRPC today. So gRPC within Google is not only used for telemetry and configuration. It's a pretty generic framework based on Protobuf. So we are in discussion with not only draft author, but creators of gRPC to create kind of independent stream which will cover more than just configuration. So if there's interest from Google to work on it and proceed as independent draft, we'll probably do it and find the right place for it. If it's only for management purposes, obviously it lives here, and seeing that Yang is finally decoupled from NetConf, I think now there are more possibilities to work together.
And again, just a minute. When we started out the IRTS work, we said absolutely focus NetConf, RESTConf, work on that. But if there are people who are interested in the other protocols, it's agnostic. As long as they use Yang, as long as we've gone through the basic fundamentals for IRTS here in NetConf and RESTConf, if people want to propose other things, we'll listen. Our first priority is that. And so if they want to come and propose that for IRTS or things like that, that's fine. It falls after the main stuff.
Okay, so I have two questions for Jeff. One is, I think, to the question that kind of been more raised, which is there effort to try to standardize that protocol in IETF? That's the first question.
We are in discussion, so to be announced later.
Okay. The second question, and relates to the charter update that Benoit just posted to the mailing list, which essentially renames the protocol NetConf to Network Configuration. So to the point that if it's a management protocol and its purpose is to configure, look at operational data and telemetry, I would think that it would belong in this working group.
I would think so too.
Okay.
And looking at telemetry, none of existing protocols today is really suitable for high speed, high throughput telemetry. So something binary and more suitable for asynchronous file transfer is needed, and gRPC fits the purpose.
So I think that we should treat this as people being welcome to the IETF, invited, before discussing if they want to standardize and where to do it. So let's listen to what they have to say.
Okay.
Just to add to that, I've read the gRPC and GNMI specs, and they have a lot of good stuff which matches to things we have in this working group and others. Certainly looking at the specs, they remind me a lot what's happened with RESTConf. And looking at some of the binary encoding objects, we're actually talking about stuff going on in CBOR. So I think that there's a lot of commonality. It would be great to get the same group of people talking these issues. And that's what I'm hoping to see, is the same set of issues with the same set of people. So whatever the working groups can do to make sure we have the same people working these issues would be great.
My name is Hui Yang from Huawei. Regarding the gRPC, we think we also can consider maybe under the Yang push model, we can provide another transport protocol for gRPC. And I think there's a lot of interesting around the gRPC. We definitely need to have some more serious discussion about it.
So you are next. So Mahesh is next. Where's the? Okay. You control your own slides.
All right. So this is an individual draft. Although it says 01, it's actually just to fix a Yang. But really, it's a 00. So the draft tries to address the last A in AAA, which is the accounting. And this draft is focusing on essentially defining a Yang model for accounting. The draft doesn't mention this, but it was pointed out that I should probably clarify that this is protocol agnostic. And that while I made an effort to try to look at both Radius and TACAX protocol for what could be borrowed, the draft itself tries to stay protocol agnostic. So if I was to look at Radius, most of the information is on details on how to communicate between the network access server and the accounting server. And it goes into details of serial lines and modem protocol pools. And there's a lot of detail into the packet format for exchange of accounting records. But since I want to keep it protocol agnostic, I decided to just look at the attribute section, which is section 5, of the RFC. And there are two particular attributes that I felt that were relevant, and I pulled them out, and I'll go into detail when we get to the accounting record itself. Similarly with TACAX, again, I looked at the accounting attributes in section 7.2 and tried to pull out what I felt would be relevant for what most of the customers would be interested in. And I tried to map it to what I define it in the accounting record in this particular draft. So if I was to summarize the observation in both Radius TACAX and NACOM, what I finally came up with is this accounting record. Now, I do realize that based on this, I did get some feedback about certain fields that I'm still missing, so I'll outline that in the next slide. One is that, one observation is that we need a rule to define access to the accounting record itself, because the information within the accounting record is sensitive, just like configuration might be. So we need a rule to define access. And that we won't have an accounting record for a get of accounting record, because that will just create a loop of more accounting records that we will keep getting on. So in next steps, one particular observation that actually Martin pointed out is that by default, we might want to have a default deny all attribute simply because if nothing is configured, a user will have full access to all the accounting records, which is not what we probably want. The other aspect that I missed in the draft was that customers would actually like to see the values that are being passed for each of the attributes. And those need probably would have to be modeled as any data. And the third suggestion from Martin was that I would probably want to add some examples for edit, config, and get, and show what the accounting record would look like for that particular operation. So this is what the tree diagram for the model currently looks like, but I expect to see some more changes in it. Questions?
Benoit Claes. So this is good in a sense that we've seen that coming, right? That everything, as you was mentioning, everything will be model driven, right? So somehow we're taking over like the last A of AAA. Somehow when Eric was presenting about the notification 2, I was recognizing the exact IP fix information element that we had, right? So, and again, that makes sense because in the end, it's more important to get the data model right. And the transport is, okay, an IP fix became a transport. Now, in your case, you want to at least warn the AAA people, right? Because they might have feedback on this one. So I'm thinking like the Radex people, for example.
Sure.
Dejan Bogdanovic, Volta. Many operators are using accounting for service assurance.
Okay.
So, you know, they use the accounting start to assure that the service, you know, has been created and activated. And I can't remember now exactly what they were looking into it. It's been like a few years since we, you know, since I looked into that. But this is something that what Benoit suggested, that either the operators or the Radius people will know what they would be looking into it. Because if you, in your case, we could do the, you know, when you're doing the, there would be some use case where they could use it, you know, for the assurance and continue what they would use it from before.
Okay. So I do have a note out to at least 2 operators. One of them did provide some feedback, but I can certainly specifically ask the question of service assurance. And the second one is in IETF, so I'll probably get hold of them to get that. Just to point out, it's not that I'm necessarily saying that we should not have a transport protocol
define or how to get, but that could be a separate document. That I just wanted to point that out. So access to it could be a separate document. Meaning, I've kept it protocol agnostic simply for the reason that if we choose to go and interact with Radius, that might be a different protocol, say from TACAX.
Benoit, so interacting with Radius, what do you mean? The Radius accounting is there, it works, right? So what you want to do is have a Yang model which is agnostic, because you could use it with the new transport being ResConf, NetConf, gRPC, you name it. Right. So I'm not sure what you mean by interacting with. The thing we're trying to solve here is a data modeling mapping issue, that we've got fields coming from AAA and TACAX and Radius and IPFix and Yang models, right? Okay. So you're trying to solve this there. That's the way I understand it.
That's true. I think I'm just speculating at this point that if today most accounting records are uploaded to a AAA server over a protocol, whether it's TACAX or it's Radius, then do we need a transport, or do we need a separate document to define that? And
it's there, because what's working today works today. So I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, it is there. It has certain characteristics, like I think there is a 255 byte limitation on the size of the packet, and how that will scale needs to be at least looked at when you're uploading NetConf records, because they will be much bigger and they would have to go over that. They will go over that limitation. So what implications?
So maybe I misunderstood, but I was thinking that you wanted to transport this with NetConf or ResConf.
That is there by default for anyone who wants to get to the record, yes. But in addition, if you want to upload it, say, to a remote AAA server, what protocol you would use is still open.
So if this is your intention, then really you must speak with the AAA people.
Yes.
The RADEX.
Yeah.
So just a quick clarification. I think I'm just a little confused. So basically, regarding the accounting model, what are you accounting for? Is it basically general purpose accounting, or basically is it accounting for NetConf?
This is accounting for NetConf, NetConf and ResConf operations.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So what is your proposal? Do you want me to ask a question, or do you want to work on this a bit more and come back?
Yeah, so I need to at least go through one update and at least get an answer to.
So as I remember, in the last meeting, there was some interest, at least, from the people in the room. Should I just ask the same question for the minutes? So who read this draft? Show hands. Who would be in favor of working on this draft in NetConf working group? Show hands. Who is against working on this draft in NetConf working group? I saw 3 hands plus, 1 hand is minus. Do you want to explain, Kent, why?
Yeah, only because I don't want there to be any distractions from the primary goal of getting the NetConf and ResConf updates out.
So noted.
Okay, fair enough. So let's work on it. If you...
Tim Carey, Nokia. So I did have a question, and it was based upon the last statement you made when someone said this is accounting just for NetConf. So when I make a get or I do a write, is that what you're saying? These are the NetConf server accounting records, and I'm like going, and then you want to send that up to an accounting server, you know, that's already got some good accounting functions through Radius or, you know, other mechanisms are there, and we're inventing a new mechanism instead of integrating into the existing mechanisms. And so that's kind of my concern is, so I'm trying to understand why we're developing a new record when we should, that should really be part of the general accounting flows that are already there, that already exist. I'm trying to understand the reasoning.
Yeah, so if you look at the current accounting record, it's mostly for CLI commands and it's command string based, where here a netconf operation, for example, especially with NACM rules, deciding whether the particular operation is allowed or denied has to carry NACM information, which is not there in the current accounting records, as an example.
But why wouldn't you just extend the existing, diameter or whatever accounting records to include those accounting records that you would need that would be, protocol based, right? Whether it's netconf or resconf.
So there are a lot of fields, and I just pulled out some of them. If you look at most of the other fields, an example off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember, is the number of packets you received on this particular connection during accounting was one of the attributes. So the question is, do we need to account for that as part of the accounting record? And I'm certainly open to someone saying, no, we need to know the number of bytes that were exchanged. And if that's so, I will include it. I have tried to take a look at what seemed relevant for netconf. And
okay, let's take this offline. Lada, you have a question from Jabbar?
I have one comment from Jabbar. Unfortunately, I don't see the name, but the comment is, I think this draft complements the traceability work in I2RS somewhat. I certainly see the value of this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mahesh. Let's stop here. The last document is from Zitao Wang on NetConf proxy. So you are lucky you've got 10 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Michael from Huawei, and today I want to introduce this machinism NetConf proxy. Okay, this is the motivation scenarios. The motivation is we want to provide the machinism to help the client to set up NetConf session to the Tajik device. It will be useful for this client which don't have the direct access to the Tajik device, especially for the following scenarios. The first scenario is a WinF scenarios. The EMF connect to the WinF agent through the public network, and the WinF agent connect to this WinF components through the private network. And the two central management, and to reduce memory resource such as IP address and bandwidth, these components may not be assigned IP address. So it cannot support NAT. So therefore, the EMS cannot manage these components through the NetConf protocols. And the second scenario is some cloud center network. The element management system connect to the gateway network element through the NetConf protocol, and the gateway network elements connects these non-gateway elements through some private protocol. And this non-gateway elements may even not IP device, so it also cannot support NAT. Therefore, the EMS cannot manage these non-gateway elements through the NetConf protocol. So to address this problem, we propose to define the NetConf protocol mechanism, NetConf proxy mechanisms. Okay, this you can see this picture. This is an overview of the solution. First, the client can set up a NetConf session to the proxy, and then client send get RPC to the proxy to retrieve the Tajik information of the proxy. Here we can see the proxy. We define the Untitled module to present the Tajik list attribute, which can tell the client the Tajik's information. Tajik information such as the Tajik ID and the support protocols and other attributes. So the client receives a proxy's response and reads this Tajik list and know what Tajik device it can connect to. Then it constructs a hello message according to the Tajik list. There is one change that the hello message need to add a new attribute, the Tajik ID. So it sends a hello message to the proxy. Proxy received it and look up the Tajik ID. If the Tajik ID can be found in the Tajik list, then the proxy connect to the corresponding Tajik device. Therefore, now the NetConf session is set up. Secondly, the client can direct NetConf request RPC to the Tajik device. Here the RPC also need to add an attribute Tajik ID to help the proxy to understand which Tajik I need to connect to and which this message I need to forward to which Tajik device. Okay, this is our solution, and in next step we'd like to call more attention and solicit more comments. We'd like to discuss and cooperate with you. If anyone have interest in this document, please let us know. Thank you.
Dan Bogdanovic, could you go back to your use case? So in this case, you're saying that your EMS and your the network elements, it doesn't matter if they're physical or virtual, that you will have an EMS that will not be able to talk to the elements, and for that reason you have to put in a proxy.
Yeah.
Do you have any other use case? Because if the NetConf server has, there an IP address that can be advertised, and then you are putting a proxy in there. I don't see how an EMS would not be able to get to that element.
You mean the first scenarios or the second?
Oh, first or so let's say in first scenario.
Okay, the VNF component may not be assigned IP device, IP address. So the EMS cannot via the IP address, so it cannot connect to the VNF components. Therefore, we want to use it. We want to define this mechanism. The proxy it can know the these components information, and then can help the EMS to connect to these components.
So you're saying that within this VNF scenario, you have a private IP address space that is not reachable outside of that domain, and in order for the EMS to talk. Okay.
So Martin Björklund, can you go back or move forward to the next slide? So in step 5, when you authenticate to the NetConf server, how do you actually authenticate there?
Excuse me, could you pardon?
How do you actually authenticate between the proxy and the target NetConf server?
Okay, I know question is authentication. The here maybe not defined clearly. The proxy have a young data module, and it records the target authentication information. Then it can connect to the use coordination, use this method, use this information or authentication method to connect to the target devices.
So does that mean that all clients will actually connect as the same with the same authentication information towards the target?
No, I don't think so. It need to the client need to use this authentication method to connect to the devices, I think.
If I can rephrase, I think Martin's question, which is what user or username password are you going to use?
Well, if it's username password, yeah, that how?
Let's say you're using username password. What are you using between the proxy and the device, and between whatever the outside device that's trying to connect? Are they the same?
Because normally it's per client, right? So if it's stored on the proxy server, it's going to be the same for all clients.
I think that it may be by the policy, maybe store on the proxy server, or just share the authentication by the server.
Then the question is, so if you're storing it, then anyone who knows that ID essentially will get access to all the devices, right?
Yes, I believe the client to the proxy also need to some authentication, the corresponding authentication to allow the client to connect to the target device. It's there need to more work on the client between the proxy. I'd like to discuss with you.
Kent Watson, going back to the use cases, I think this is an important problem, but so more so on the left-hand side of the picture, not specific to VNF scenarios, though. I've seen that, but many times there's a gateway device that's, and there's other devices behind it. You really don't know how many other devices there are behind it, but you have to be able to access those other devices through the gateway device. So I understand that use. The use case on the right-hand side, I feel less compelled to support because it seems more like a device adaptation layer. I think it's actually a different problem. You can maybe solve it through the notion of a proxy, but it could actually be considered as a different problem. But going back to the actual proxy use case, I definitely don't think there should be a NetConf only solution. I'd like to see it support, RESTconf, or gRPC, other types of protocols. The way I've seen this solved to date is actually using SSH. So you would SSH to the gateway device and then use SSH port forwarding to be able to access the devices behind it. That's being done at the transport IP level, right? So it works for all protocols, but it is unfortunately only for SSH, which means it doesn't work for TLS, the other transport that supports NetConf. So now, I used to like Beep because you could kind of do a little bit of multi-channeling or but it never had the port forwarding or the either that SSH has. So I don't know. This is an interesting problem space. I don't know if it should be done at the transport level or the protocol level, but and of course the discussion of authentication. I mean, that's almost secondary to if you're doing a transport level.
Okay. Dan Bogdanovic. One thing is when you're creating a management network and you're trying to break your management network topologies or try to segment and then put proxy in between, this is something that I, in my experience, haven't seen that. Most of the management networks that I've seen, they were reachable end to end. So, and in this case, there are some authentication issues. And then how many devices do you, as Kent mentioned, how many devices do you have inside the domain? Where will you get, all that information from?
Okay, there need to, this question need to discuss more. Okay, thank you.
All right, sorry.
Just to add on to that, right, with your sequence diagram, your get target list, and it replied with A. I mean, how did it even know A was there? I mean, normally you'd do like a subnet, a scan, a network scan to figure it out, how many IPs are there. So I don't know how it would have known to respond with A in the first place. So just something more to think about.
Okay. All right. So I think based on the comments, you might want to at least try to address the question of you want to solve this problem at the transport level or at application level. And then if you're trying to do it at the transport level or whatever, solve the question of authentication.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you can discuss offline to improve your document. Thank you very much.
All right.
So this is the end of the session. Thank you all. See you next time. I was doing it usually. May I ask you to do it this time, a summary of the decisions?
Sure, I can certainly do it.
I am
You're not feeling very good.
Most likely I will be sleeping the rest of the week.
Okay, yeah, I can certainly take care of that.
You can send me your draft, we can improve, and we should give it to Benoit